Hi, this is Em, and today we're going to take a deep dive into flow pens for color enhancing pressed flowers. And I have a specific goal in mind, which is as I go through some of my stash of pressed flowers, and these are older flowers that have faded, and I'm trying to decide what to do. Should I put them in my second packs for Etsy? And the answer is some of these no. Should I make some packs for specifically for color enhancement? I don't know. Maybe some of you have feedback. Because you will see as we get into actually working with these flowers, which will be a different video, why I say that. The subject of today is the different kinds of flow pens, how they can be used for color enhancing flowers, and we're just going to kind of talk about a couple of different attributes like water soluble versus alcohol based. And I'm just going to give you a quick example here of flowers that this has been color enhanced with markers. This has not. And you can see how the markers took what was faded and brownish here and just took it all away, but yet still maintained the transparency where, for example, this is azalea, and azalea has these little stippling dots. That's a natural part of azalea. And then you can see these tendrils coming out, that type of thing. So it didn't take any of that away. It just covered this brown and made a flower that would otherwise not be usable because it's older into usable. Same with this. This has been markered, and this has been markered. This has not. And this is what this flower actually looks like when it's picked fresh. It's more of this kind of an ochre type yellowish. This is what it looks like after a couple of years. These are from 2018. So these are a couple of years old. They still look okay. I mean, if you made an arrangement out of these, 2-3 years ago, they'd still have some color and look fine. But if you haven't done anything with them and you want to bring them back to life, or if you just picked them and they're like this when you just picked them and you want them to maintain some color for a lot more years than say 2 or 3, then you want to go ahead and color enhance them right off the bat. Now, having said that, remember when we're talking about color enhancement, if you're just using cards or something quick and you don't care if they fade into more of a mellow color, which is still very pretty, then don't even worry about this subject. This is for people, this color enhancement playlist is for people who want to take a deep dive into the subject, and so there's going to be a lot of information. It's going to be very much of me sharing my thoughts, and so hopefully you'll stay tuned. And I just wanted to give you an example of what we're going to do with some of these flow pens once we get done talking about them and what they can accomplish for you. So that's what this is going to be talking about. And one of the reasons that I will think of using flow pens is because these particular kinds of plants are very waxy. And when you use a wet medium on them, oftentimes the wet medium just beads up. And so sometimes it will call for something like an alcohol ink that dries really fast and doesn't bead up. And so these are all the kinds of things that we'll be exploring as we go forward. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, then please stay tuned. We'll get started with our deep dive into markers. The first considerations in markers is that there could be more types out there, but I'm going to tailor this to what I think I know, basically. So if there's more out there, please share in the comments. But I'm going to stick with these 3 basic categories for the purposes of what we're doing today. And that is water-soluble, meaning that if you color your flowers or use them, and those of you that have been doing a lot of crafting for years know about these different things, but basically if you use a water-soluble marker and then you want to put Mod Podge or something that is a medium that is a water base on top, it is going to run. And so you need to think about what you're going to use your flowers for when using anything that's water-soluble on top of them. For example, If you're going to be putting them into a frame with glass or acetate, and you're going to hear me say these types of things more than once in different videos, because not everybody watches all of my videos, and it's a very important point, which is that if you're putting things under something that doesn't have an adhesive in and of itself, it doesn't matter. Use whatever you want, use whatever you have on hand, don't worry about it. This is only, like I said, a deep dive breaking down things that you need to understand if you're venturing into things like laminates, contact papers, cold laminates that have adhesive, packing tape, things like that. These are just things to keep in the back of your mind as you move forward. Or if you're going to put a wet medium on top, as the example I gave of Mod Podge, Collage Podge, gloss mediums, anything like that, that could cause what you use on top of your flowers to run. Then there's the alcohol-based markers. A lot of you have Copic markers on hand, which would be an example. I'll actually show some of the markers that I have, and I'll talk about whether they're alcohol or not in just a minute. And then I put this third category, I put as solvent or fabric. Sharpie markers that are not the fabric markers, I'm not really sure what they use. I don't know if they're alcohol-based, if they mix it with some other solvent in there. So I just kind of put them in a solvent and fabric category. And the same with the fabric markers. When you see some of the tests that I did, in just a second I'll show you my sheet, nothing affected the tulip and the Sharpie stained fabric markers as far as running, bleeding, or anything like that. So there's got to be something more in there to inhibit any kind of solubleness more than just being an alcohol base or a water base. So I put that into the third category. And then fourth, when it comes to talking about these types, would be testing. Again, depending upon how you want to use your flowers, is the behooving on testing. And let me explain what I mean by that. So for example, I showed this in a video probably a year or two ago, and the video was an hour, so I'm going to show it again here because it's applicable to this playlist. And what that is I took water, alcohol, acetone, mineral spirits, glossy axis, diamond glaze, matte medium, and ammonia. And I tested, excuse me, I tested fabric paint, the fabric paint that I use most often, tulip markers, stained by Sharpie, tulip. For some reason, tulips come in two different colors, and I don't know if it's because one's a 12-pack and one comes in more, whether they've updated their packaging or what. I'm not really sure why, but I've got both, and they both behave the same in that regard. So this was tulip, this was stained by Sharpie, this was fabric paints, and then the regular Sharpie that I used was just these guys. Just the regular ones that you buy at the store. Excuse me for bumping the camera. Tombow markers, it's these guys. And then Dynaflow, which is a paint, which is not what we're talking about today, so we're not really going to go into that. But the point I want to make here is that the fabric paint, the tulip, and the stained by Sharpie passed every single test, as you can see. There's no smudging, bleeding, anything on any of these. Until you get down to the regular Sharpie. The regular Sharpie worked fine with water, but not alcohol. So we can suspect that it's alcohol-based to a certain extent. Did not work with acetone. It was fine with mineral spirits, glossy accents, diamond glaze, matte medium, because, of course, these are water-based. It worked fine for ammonia, too. So basically, alcohol and acetone, it did not work. Tombow markers which I haven't used Tombow markers in many years. I brought them out today. They've been sitting on my shelf probably for about 15 years, and a lot of them still work, simply because as I did other tests going forward in the future, there were other things that worked better. The Tombow markers were good for putting under contact paper, which is what I originally used them for, and they have a lot of really wonderful colors that I love. But for putting under, matte mediums and other things, not so much. But you can see they're water-based. They didn't work too well with water. They did work okay with the alcohol and acetone, which is why I suspect that they work fine under contact paper and laminate. So if you're using contact paper and laminate, Tombows, as I recall, are fairly successful. But again, all these water-based mediums, they just didn't work. So just keep that in mind. And the Dynaflow, like I said, we're not talking about. Now, if you don't want to get this detailed and you don't know what your markers are, let's say you have a bunch of markers on hand and you're going, well, I don't remember if they're alcohol-based or water-based, which is probably the two primary categories to be concerned about. Just get yourself a piece of paper, and that's what I did here, for example. Let me bring it up to the camera. And I just marked what it is, put a couple of little test strips there, and then I took a piece of paper towel and some water, which is what we're going to do now, because I've got some new markers on hand that I didn't have before. Now we know that the Tombow's going to run with water, so we can tell right away. And I have two kinds of if I'm pronouncing that right, forgive me if I'm not. I have an alcohol-based and a water-based. And the alcohol-based I already tested with water, and it's fine. It doesn't react with water. But this other kind that I have is water-based. Now, it doesn't run as fast as the Tombow. So let's test the Artiste. Let's see what those are. Okay, there's one swipe. Oh, okay, I'm surprised. I thought those were more water-based too. See? Now that was 3 swipes. There's a little bit, you can see a little bit of green smearing there, but not bad. Let's see, I've got these broad tip bullet markers. Oh wow, okay, well, same thing. It did smear after I went over it a number of times, but the first time wasn't too bad. So I would say just do some quick tests like this. It only takes a second. And if you can get a number of swipes before it starts smearing very bad, then give it a try with some mediums. But Tombow, I wouldn't even go there. It's just not, it's just not going to work. Now I want to take some alcohol and see what happens. Quick note, now that we've been talking and doing, and the paper has had a chance to absorb some of the water, you can start seeing the ooh starting to bleed a little bit. I am so sorry. My camera setup is really bad, so you've got this ridge of darkness going on through here, but I've just got to work around it. But hopefully you can see how it's starting to bleed out. So that's what's happening there. And then let's look at the other ones. Are they starting to bleed out? I gotta hold it towards me. I can't see. The Artiste is not starting to bleed out. The broad line, a little bit on the green, but the ooh is starting to bleed out a lot. Okay, so I wanted to try alcohol. These are still wet. I should have done another line, but we'll give her a try. Okay, this is alcohol. I've got a little piece of Ooh-hoo here I didn't get wet. Okay, so it's not reacting with alcohol. Tombow, we already know, does not react with alcohol. So now this Artise, it's reacting a little bit with the alcohol, and that bullet, not too much. Now, I did not use alcohol on this test yet because I just did water yesterday. So let's do that. Let's get some alcohol just to prove this out. This should bleed with alcohol. So we'll see. This is archival ink. I was just testing. What I find interesting on the Ohuhu is that it's alcohol, but, well, we'll see once it absorbs. Yeah, I can see it starting to bleed. And this was a no name. I didn't make. All right, let's let that sit for a minute and see what happens. The Ohuhu alcohol-based, you can see a little bit, it's starting to bleed around the outer edges, which is what I would suspect. And the archival ink, water nor alcohol seem to affect it, so that's good. The Sharpie brush tip 12 count, yes, it's bleeding with around the edges with the alcohol, which again I would suspect. The stain by Sharpie is fine, water or alcohol, but we already knew that from the other test sheet that I showed you. And then this no-name brand, looks like it might be starting to bleed a little bit with the alcohol. So having said that, let's take a look at a couple of the specific markers that I have on hand. And what did we learn? These are Ohuhu. And I really am sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. OHUHU. It's a 60 color set. And they were okay with alcohol, but they bleed with water. So they're water based. But they have a lot of really nice colors, and I like using them. So depending upon what I want to do with the flowers, first let's take a look at the tip on these. They have a brush tip, which to me is really important when you use them for flowers, because you can, primarily I use it this way. And then it also has a fine tip. The Artisa Dough Crafts Artiste, A-R-T-I-S-T-E. I am really bad with pronouncing things, again, forgive me. It says watercolor dual tip pens, high quality water-based, acid-free, non-toxic. And they've got a really fine brush tip. I mean, look at how small that tip is. But they seem to work fine for that type of application. And if you wanted something with a really fine brush tip, that would be good for doing that. And then it has a larger bullet tip than the Ohuhu had, which had a really small fine tip on it. And this is a 12 pack, and again, these are water soluble, and we thought that alcohol might sort of be okay as long as you don't rub and rub and rub. Then these are the broad line marker that I talked about up in this upper corner up here. And I don't know what kind of maker they are. There's just some cheap set I got from who knows where. And I wouldn't really even use them for flowers. I just had them and thought I'd play around with them. they're a bullet tip. I suppose if you had a specific small little center or something that you're working on, you could use them for flowers, but they're certainly not going to brush on a swath of color, which you will see what I mean when I actually start using these to color enhance some flowers. But there they are. Just if you have some of this type of thing on hand, you know, you can play around with it. What else is water soluble? Oh, Tombow. Very, very water soluble right away. But they have beautiful colors, and I love working with them. Their brush tip is wonderful, and even after 15 years, I've had these, like I say, I've had these for, maybe even longer than 15 years, and most of the colors still work really well. The brush tip is just outstanding. I really, really like these. I need to start using them more when I know that I'm not going to put some medium on top, because I know they work. Like I say, I know these work under contact paper and laminate, because this is what I used to use years ago when I was using them. The reason why I get so many different markers is because of the colors. It's really hard to find some good greens. This looks like they have some really nice greens in here, and so I like to get different colors so I can play with different tinting, which is the other thing you'll see when we start coloring flowers, is that some of these will tint and adhere to certain things better than others. And so one kind of marker that will work with one kind of flower and application won't with another one. And so I like to have different things to draw upon. So those were our water-based. Then we had our alcohol-based, which we know is, now these are new. I just got these last week because I wanted to play around with some more alcohol markers, because I knew I was going to be doing this color enhancement on some of these flowers that I'm going to show you in a minute, which are difficult to color enhance because they're very waxy and water-based mediums beat up, and so I wanted some more alcohol things. And I don't have any Copics on hand. If you have Copics, then go ahead and give those a try. And while these weren't the least expensive thing around, I thought it was worth the investment to give it a try. And so I don't even know what all these colors look like, so I'm gonna be interested to explore these in detail when we get into that. So there's a broad tip on here, which I won't normally use for coloring flowers. Well, maybe it'd work for something that is pretty sturdy, where you need to lay down a lot of color at once. But primarily, it's got a really nice brush tip on it. Look at how beautiful that brush tip is. So I think I'm going to like these a lot. Then you've got your brush tip Sharpies, which we know are react with alcohol, but not with water. These are got a really nice brush tip on them. It lays down a pretty broad stroke, so I like that. Well, and again, these are, I went shopping here a couple of weeks ago for some more brush tip markers that were not water-based. And so I invested in this pack, I invested in the Oohoo's, I think were the two. Oh, and then I invested in this pack of Sharpies, but these are fine tip. As a matter of fact, I haven't even opened them yet, but they are, you can see right here, they're an ultra fine tip, and I got that more for just doing other work besides flowers. It would be fine on flowers if you just want to do a little stippling or lay down something where you needed a fine point, but I needed a set like this. I got that, and I expect these to react the same as these, which would be, and then these Sharpies we already talked about on that big test paper sheet. Again, we know that these are fine with water, but they will react a little bit with the alcohol. Then the last main segment was the fabric markers, which I know works with everything because of that test sheet we did. These are stained by Sharpie. They are marketed for fabric. It says fabric marker on it. And same with the tulip. Now there may be other brands of fabric marking pens out there, and I've tried to find and or purchase more fabric marking brand pens out there. The problem that I'm having, and if you know where to get any other brands or have some, the problem that I'm having, however, is they don't have brush tips. There are other brands of fabric markers out there, but they don't have brush tips. So let me know. I'd invest in another set of fabric markers if they had brush tips. One other thing that I want to mention while we're talking about markers, which you may have seen on the sheet and you may have been thinking, well, what's that about? I like to use contact paper a lot, and I use the Magic Cover, which you've seen me talk about in other videos. And because these Ohu alcohol markers are new for me, and the Sharpie brush tips and the no names and the stained, I had not tested them under contact paper. So that's what I did yesterday when I was playing around. I put the markers on just these little pieces of flowers, and then I just put contact paper on top. And I'm going to let them sit for a while, and I'm going to see if it looks like they start bleeding or doing anything that I wouldn't be happy with. In other words, to see if any of these particular products will react with the adhesive that's used in this particular contact paper. So if you're going to use a paint or a marker or some sort of medium under something with adhesive, it's a good idea to test. And once I do all my tests, I will then generally decide what I like the best. I'll know that, okay, I really like these markers for this application. For example, like I said earlier, I know that Tombows work under contact paper, so that's fine. If I'm going to use something for that, then Tombows is the thing. If I'm using glass, it doesn't matter. And so I do like to test things. And one of the reasons that I'm sharing some of these videos is that maybe it will help you cut to the chase. If you're going, oh, I want to use some contact paper and I want to make some tags, or I want to do some cards, or I want to do some things, but what kind of color can I use that would work with contact paper? Well, hopefully I can help you narrow the focus. It still doesn't negate you doing some of your own testing, because just because something works for me, you know, you may have a different product, or you may have a different technique that it may not have the same result for you. So it behooves you to experiment and test, which to me is half the fun. I actually really like testing. I probably spend as much time testing as I do actually getting anything accomplished, but that's that's another story. But I did want to let you know what this is about, and that this is a good idea, and it does tie in with the markers. And I've only had this done for a day, and I'm trying to see. So far it looks like everything is holding up. I don't see any bleeding starting to happen yet. So that's a good sign that there was no instant reaction with the glue with any of these particular products. You have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in,